first thing I'm going to tell you to do about 4.1 is get your calculators out. Because if there's any section in this book to where you can use your calculators, it's this section. Now, before we start with the calculator, I'm going to review a little bit of algebra. And that little bit of algebra is graphing. Glad y'all can make it. Right? How was breakfast? Was it good? Good. So, do y'all remember graphing, how to find the slope of a line? Yes. Okay, that's all you're doing in this section. And finding out how steep a line is. Is it shallow? Is it steep? Is it flat? You know, all those questions. Those are the things that I'm not going to ask you to find the correlation coefficient. I'm not going to ask you to do that because that is just too tedious math. All I want you to be able to do in here is if the line's going uphill, is it going downhill, what is the slope, and what is the y-intercept. Why? Because that's what you're going to be asked in real life. You're not going to be asked the correlation coefficient unless you're going into mathematics or unless you're going into statistics. Nobody's going to ask that, okay? So, open your notebook, get your pen out, and let's review this. So, the general slope of a line is y is equal to mx plus b, where b is the what? The y-intercept. So let's go ahead and put that down. B is the y-intercept. And let's use a different color to highlight. M. What is M? That's the slope. Slope is vertical over what? Horizontal. Let's go ahead and highlight this area right here. What is that?
That's the value that, like, changes the slope. I don't know how, but it changes the slope.
Well, you're talking about the sign. The sign tells you if you're going left to right uphill or left to right what? Downhill. So the sign, because one thing that I try to tell all my students, because they're not taught where they're supposed to be taught, is the sign in mathematics and science tells you one thing. What does it tell you?
If it's up or down.
Direction. It always tells you direction in science and math. It never tells you the amount. Okay? People say, well, what about negative $400 in your bank account? Well, the negative tells you it's what? Below zero. Okay? That means I got negative $400. No, it doesn't. It means you've got $400 below of zero balance. Think of any application of a negative or positive in the United States, in your world, what always follows it? A direction. Below, under, what else? Anytime you see a negative, those two things are right behind it. Negative being below and under. Negative 400 feet below sea level. So don't try to put an amount on a negative. That's not what it is. If I give you negative 500 on the number line, what does that mean? To the what of zero? To the left. So you need to remember, negative means left to right down. Positive means left to right up. Why is it left to right? Well, since you were in kindergarten, how have you been reading? Masalama. Unless you're from the Middle East, you read right to left, and then none of this applies. Okay? Masalama means go in peace. All right, so that's the slope. Then your x is your input, your y is your what? Output. Now, there's two formulas that you have to know in your review, and the first one is slope. equals delta y over delta x, or vertical over horizontal, or y sub 2 minus y sub 1 over x sub 2 minus x sub 1. All of these mean the same thing. Okay? This is more of a science application. This is more of an algebra application. And this is more of a calculation application. Okay? And then there is the point slope equation. Point slope equation is y minus y sub 1 is equal to m times x minus x sub 1. Now those are the two equations that you need to know in order to find your way around 4.1 and 4.2. Of course, you need to know how to graph a point, but I think most of you know how to graph a point. Most of them can be in the first quadrant, but some can be in the other three quadrants. Capisce? All right. I wish I could say that like a real Italian. Capisce? They say it different. I can't say it. I say it redneck. Capisce? They go capisce. I can't say it. Okay? Capisce? All right. So, correlation has to do a lot with the steepness of a line. I don't know how to spell correlation. That's not right. Okay, now I gotta sit this way. Sorry. Has it got two L's in it? I don't think it did. Give me a few seconds to do this. It would have helped a long time ago if they trained us on these things. Oh well. Correlation. Is that right? Correlation is basically steepness. Are y'all listening or are y'all talking while I'm writing? I'll remember that when y'all come and ask me a question. I'll talk to somebody else while you're asking me a question. See how you like it. All right, steepness. If I've got a shallow correlation, it'll look something like that. If I've got a real good correlation, it'll be something like that. But either way, there is a correlation, meaning a correlation, a negative correlation or a positive correlation. If you have something like this, that's supposed to be horizontal. There is no correlation. So here you have correlation. Here you have correlation. Here you do not have correlation. I don't know what's going on with this board, so I guess I need to reset calibration. I don't know. So correlation, correlation, no correlation. Oops, sorry. So here I got a positive correlation. Here I got a positive correlation. Here I got a negative correlation. Here I got a negative correlation. Now the degree of that correlation could be your slope, or it could be the correlation coefficient. Like I say, I'm not going to ask you to calculate the correlation coefficient. If you want to look at it in your book, you can see that's a very tedious process. Okay? I really haven't researched it on the calculator. Some of y'all that spin the calculator around on your finger, y'all maybe can tell me or tell the class about how to find it, but I just want the slope. And that's all I'll test you on if I do test you on that. Most of the time, I'm just going to ask you if there's a correlation. Now, what is a correlation definition? Well, how many of you have seen the Matrix 2 movie? Okay? They go to a French restaurant, and there's this French guy, and they want to get the key maker. Okay? So they, Fishburne and what's his name, and Trinity, they all go and we want to see the key maker. And there's a French guy there, and he's the whole head of the gatekeeper and all that stuff. Whatever. And he says, he makes a statement. He says, everything has cause and effect. I drink too much wine, I have to pee. Okay, you remember when he says that?
Yes.
That's cause and, thank you, I appreciate that, whoever said that. Thank you for the interaction. Okay, you remember it? Good. That means what? Cause and effect. If you drive like a damn maniac, eventually you're going to have a what? A wreck. All right? Because you only got a 1/4 inch of rubber separating you from the road. And how many of you ever worked on your brake lines? None of you. The brake line is only about 1/8 of an inch thick. So if your brake lines bust under high pressure and you're driving an older car, then you might have a wreck, especially if you're driving 70, 80 miles an hour in a 55-mile-an-hour zone. So, cause and effect. If you drive fast, your insurance rate will be what? Sky high. Your percentage of death will be sky high. That's why I pay less insurance for my daughter than I will be for my son. Okay? Because my son, 15 to 35, is stupid. Okay? If you're in that age group, I'm sorry, but you're stupid. All right? Women from 15 to 25. Not so stupid, but make bad decisions. Okay? All right? Some make good decisions, but in other words, the insurance is cheaper on a female than a male. Okay? Because males are stupid. 15 to 35. So, how about this? How about MPG versus weight of a car? Is there a correlation? What kind of correlation? Well, let's just make up a graph. Let's say this is the weight of a car. 2,000 pounds or 1,500 pounds. 2,000, 3,000, 4,000. Okay? And let's say this is MPG. 10 miles to the gallon, 15 miles to the gallon, 20 miles to the gallon, 25 miles to the gallon, and 30 miles to the gallon. What do you drive? SUV. So that's probably around 3,000 pounds. What mileage do you get? You know? You don't? Who knows their mileage on their car? Okay. What do you drive? Camry. So that's Toyota. So that's about 2,000 pounds. What do you get?
23 miles per gallon.
Okay. So that's up here. All right. How about what do you drive?
Cobalt.
A what?
Cobalt.
That's a compact car, so it's about 1,500. How much do you get?
25.
25, so it's a little bit above here. All right, let's talk to the anti-American people, the people that drive SUVs or a truck. Okay, a big truck or a big SUV. Anybody?
I got a GMC.
Okay.
Not a truck.
Well, that doesn't count as a truck. But anyway,
It's not a truck.
I'm kidding. I'm a Ford and a Dodge owner, so I really don't like bow ties or GMC. But anyway,
I got a
Yukon. Okay, it's SUV, but you're talking probably 3,000 pounds. What do you get? 18?
Yeah.
15? So, somebody tell me if there's a correlation on this unscientific survey I just took. Yes, what kind of correlation? Okay, now find the slope of that line. Find the equation of that line. Do it. If you can't do it, just consider yourself what? A failure. I tell you what, pick this point and pick this point. Find the slope of that line. Turn to your previous notes, and if I ask you to find the slope of the line, you use the slope what? Formula. Yeah, there you go. You're getting it. Thank you for the help on Covenant. I loaded Covenant. It took me about 2 days, but I finally got it. No, it actually took 2 or 3 tries. Yeah, but I eventually got it. I had to reboot it several times, but it works. I still can't get it, so I guess I'm just gonna have to go to the movie theater. Every time I pull it up, it goes to downloads, and then it goes to the viewers, but every viewer says Covenant does not have it, so evidently not Spielberg, Stephen King hexed everybody.
Don't watch the new King movie.
Huh?
Don't watch.
Oh, I don't watch those. I don't watch those.
Don't watch the new
It
one.
looks kind of rad.
I watched it for free and I wanted a refund so bad.
That's the way I was on Get Out. I'm just glad I didn't pay for it. I only watched like 15, 20 minutes of it. I'm like, really?
I didn't like Don't Pay for It. Don't breathe. I didn't like it.
I didn't watch it because I don't like movies like that.
Yeah, don't pay for it anyway.
Yeah, Don't Pay for It. Yeah. No, it is.
But then I won't go then.
It was good.
It's kind of
What'd you say?
After like 5.
It was good.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah, I thought so.
Well, it depends on your horror
It's
factor.
like 3 people. Yeah.
My horror factor is very high. Yeah. Yeah, well, Stephen King does. That's what I like about Stephen King. You never know what. I mean, he's not going to have real horror, he's not going to have haunting / paranormal type stuff in his movie. He's going to have just maybe a jump scare every once in a while, but there'll be a whole lot more in-depth stuff in his stuff, and I like that about him. But the horror factor, probably about a 3 on a scale from 1 to 10. So I like the paranormal activity, the hauntings, and the possessions. That's what I like.
Me too, but that made me so sick.
For what? No, I haven't seen that yet. Is that going to be bad?
I'm excited about it, but I only saw the preview, so you haven't watched it. I'm excited about it.
See, I can get y'all to interact, just not about what. Yeah, that's all. Y'all suck. All right, 25, comma, 1,500. And 15, comma, 3,000. Which way do we read? So this is x of 1, this is y sub 1, this is x of 2, this is y sub 2. So we go to our handy dandy slope formula. Y sub 2 minus y sub 1 over x of 2 minus x of 1. Y sub 2 is 3,000. Y sub 1 is 1,500. X of 2 is 15. 25. M, huh?
X supposed to be on 5.
Yeah, yeah. You got your X's and Y's for 3 cents. Like the X's would be 1,500 and 3,000.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Change X over there.
I'm sorry. I suck. Let's see, that should be 1,500. And I don't have an eraser because I haven't been trained on this stuff. Had it for 2 years, but hadn't been trained. Sorry about that. 1,500. Now this is when everybody's supposed to say, "Oh, I thought that. I just didn't say anything." Shut up, people. Oh, I wondered what he was doing. 3,000, comma, 15. There we go. Now I need to change this. Sorry about that. Okay, so y sub 2 is 25, or 2015, minus 25 over 3,000 minus 1,500. And 15 minus 25 is negative 10. And 3,000 minus 1,500 is, and zeros cancel, so M is equal to negative 1 over 150. That's a pretty steep slope. Okay, a pretty shallow, because it's a fraction between 0 and 1, so it's shallow. Okay, now y minus y sub 1 is equal to M times x minus x sub 1. So I need to pick a point. Which point do you think I'm going to pick? the top one, 1,525. 1 is smaller number, the 1,500 is smaller, and 2 is your first point. So it doesn't matter which one you pick. So I'm going to pick 1,525, and my slope is equal to negative 1 over 150. They're going to train us one day on these things. We're going to get a new system. They're called, well, there's 2 systems. The one's called Clever Touch. Have you ever heard of Clever Touch? Or HP ThoughtScreen. Basically, they're 55 inch and above. What do you call these? Touch pads, whatever you call them. And you put it on the wall. Therefore, you don't need a smart board, and you don't need a projector. Guess when we'll get training on this? When they put the Clever Touches in. That's when we'll get training on these smart boards. We still got teachers that don't even turn these on. They still use this. We actually had one teacher on this campus that asked for a blackboard. I'm gonna keep my mouth shut. All right, so this is x of 1. This is y sub 1. Y minus parentheses equals m times x minus parentheses. Now, do you notice all these parentheses that I put in? The reason I do that is because students screw this up, either because of the fraction or the negative. And that's where most of you students screw it up. So if you screw this part up, and you know you screw this part up, you might want to put parentheses. So, 25, negative 1 over 150, and 1,500. The reason I'm not using a calculator and changing it 1 over negative 150 is when you start changing it in decimals, you're going to have to start depending on what? The calculator. That's why they get you to use calculators so much in school. Y, so you use less of your brain. Y minus 25 is equal to negative 1 over 150 x plus 1,500 over 150, and look what happens to the zeros. Wow. So, y minus 25 is equal to negative 1 over 150x plus what? What's 150? Now, be careful here. What's 150 divided by 15? It's a miracle. Y'all want to check it on your calculator? Y is equal to negative 1 over 150 plus what? 35. Now, all you have to do is go weigh your car. Go weigh your car and plug it in for what? X Hubert. That's right, class. And you'll get what? What you should get on gas mileage, depending upon those 2 examples that we used, which is very, 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 very non-scientific. Okay? Now, how do you do that on your calculator? Well, I don't believe it worked. You hit the on button, and then you go to Stat and Edit. Now you're in a spreadsheet. Now, the good thing about the calculator, and that's why this is so important in this section, is the calculator can run a line of regression a whole lot quicker than any of us could. And I'll explain to you what a line of regression is in just a second. But I'm going to go ahead and put the 2 that we put in there. All right, 1,500. Well, I'm going to screw that up. 1,500 delete, enter. And what's the other one? Do we use 3,000? 3,000. And then 25 and 15. Now you can graph this by going to second stat plot. And we'll do that when we get to the regression. We've already graphed it, so I'm not going to do that right now. We're going to go ahead and go to stat, calculate, and go down to first variable statistic. That's one, no, not first variable statistic. Linear regression. And hit enter. And hit second 1, comma, second 2. Look above the 1 and the 2. What do you see above the 1 and the 2? L1 and L2. That's your first column and your second column. And hit enter. And look there. Y is equal to mx plus b. Just ignore the calculator, because one thing that mathematics does in class, they don't do outside of class. So just say y is equal to mx plus b. And our b is 35. Look there. 35. And if you take 1 and divide it by 150, what will you get? 0.0066. Now that's how you find slope and the y-intercept of a line. Well, what's the problem in 4.1 and 4.2? I don't give you just 2 points. I give you like 5 or 6 points. Now, that's when you use the line of regression, or the best fit. Best fit. Let's say I give you a bunch of data, and you have this. Instead of the 2 points that we had, you have all these points. Well, according to the best fit regression formula, you find, if you find a line, I'm going to draw it in red, that best fits all these points. Well, thanks. I thought it was going to be a line, but anyway, that's eyeballs. And and I'm not going to get into the formula, but how it does it is it takes the distance, the averages of these distances, and it basically finds the average and the median of those distances, and it places that line in the best fit. Okay? Just remember best fit, because that's what it does. I'm not going to ask you to do that. They used to do it back before calculators, but now you don't do it. And it's a very tedious math formula. Okay? So we're not going to do that. What we're going to do is we're just going to type in the values, and then you find the best fit and the slope and the equation of the slope. That's all I want you to do in this section. All right, so let's do one. Let's just make up one. Let's say that you have a bunch of points, and I'll just say X and Y. We're just going to keep this in algebra right now. And let's go 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, and we'll say this is 105, 207, 218, 300, 330, and 350. So there's not a straight line. Now I want you to take those points, put them in your calculator, and then I want you to tell me the slope, and then I want you to tell me the equation of that line. And I also want you to graph it. And we'll show you how to graph it. And I'm going to do it on the calculator also. Now, if you want to look at the slope, or not the slope, the graph, you hit second, stat plot, and then you click on enter, and then you turn it on by hitting enter with on, and then you do a scatter plot. You can do whichever one you want, but I'm going to pick the scatter plot, which is a bunch of dots. And it's already defaulted to L1 and L2. And you can use dots, or you can use those things right there. I'm just going to use those. And hit graph. And you might have to hit zoom and stat, which I think is 9. And there's the points. So make sure you can do the stat plot so you'll know what it looks like. Now, what kind of correlation do we have there? Positive correlation, and it's pretty steep. Now, how do you find a line there? Well, that's why the calculator is so important, because if you was to try to find a line there, it would probably go something like, it's not going to let me draw it. Let's see. Let me do this up here. It would be a line that looks something like that. Okay? Of course, mine might be a little bit off, but there's so much your eyesight can do. That's why the calculator, in this section, the calculator is very important. Okay? Because it's used as a tool the way it's supposed to be used, not to take square root of 25. All right. So, take your handy dandy calculator now and find the linear regression. So, go back to stat. Hello. Clear. Okay, second, quit. Oh, I know why it's not working. There. So, clear. There we go. Go back to stat. Is everybody listening?
Yes.
Okay, go to calculate. Linear regression. Enter. Second, 1, comma. Second, 2. And hit enter. And there is your slope and your y-intercept. So now you can say y is equal to 9.58x plus 84.06. And now you can do a prediction of the y-intercept. And you can do a prediction of what y will be when x is 2,500 or whatever. Okay. And that's basically what 4.1 and 4.2 is. Now, what kind of questions will I ask you on the test? Well, you'll see when we review the test. But there'll be a question like this, like we just did. I'll just write it down for you. So when you get to a homework question, it looks all complicated. Just do the best you can on it. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time in class going over that tedious work. You'll get a question like this. And you ask correlation, is it positive correlation or negative correlation? Of course, that is a negative correlation. Okay? I'll give you one that's a positive correlation. And I'll give you probably one that has what? Zero correlation. Oh, not zero. No.
Like if it's flat, the term is 0 for
Yes. Then I'll give you one where you find the slope. Find the slope. And then I'll give you one, find linear regression based on the calculator. This is calculated. I don't want you to do it by hand. I want you to do it with the calculator. Find the equation. Why do I not want you to use by hand? Because you can't find the linear regression unless I show you the formula that you got to do every single point. You got to calculate every single point. Which one problem would take up the whole test time of an hour, or 2 problems would take up a whole test time. And I don't think y'all want to do that, so I don't care about doing it. I mean, I don't care about you doing it, so I don't care about you doing it. I don't think you need to worry about it, okay? If you can do this, then 4.1 and 4.2, I'm good with. Let's look and see. I don't know what kind of questions they're going to ask, but let's look and see. Let's just look at the slide presentation and see what they cover. It's about the only thing I know to do. And see what they cover. Because that's what I was going to do today anyway, is do the slide presentation if I could find it. See? And what you're used to doing in algebra is how many points? 2. So, you know, what's your name again? Last name?
Me?
Mm-hmm.
Gomez?
Gilman?
Gomez.
Goldman. I'm sorry.
Gomez.
Okay. What's your first name?
Eileen.
Eileen. Okay. Eileen. She was asking about 4.1 and 4.2 the other day, and I hadn't covered it yet. And I messed up, so I forgot that I haven't covered it. And a lot of people, when they go into 4.1 and 4.2, they are coming out of algebra, and they only are used to 2 points. And then when you're flooded with however many points this is, you don't know what to do. And you know how to graph them, and you know how to put, you know, dot to dot. But as far as a correlation, and as far as a slope, and as far as the equation, you don't know what to do unless you've had algebra before. I mean, not algebra, probability and statistics. So this right here, if I was to be an awful teacher and put one like this on a test with 15 points, what would you do? You would put them all in the calculator. If I asked you to graph it, then you would match the graph on the test with the graph in your calculator. Or if I asked for a positive or negative correlation, you'd look at your calculator and say, okay, that's positive or negative correlation. And then if I asked you, you would tell me the slope and you would tell me the equation of the line. That's all I'm going to ask. But we'll look and see what they do. There's a scatter plot. What kind of correlation is it? Positive correlation. And this is the kind of stuff I'm going to ask. I'm not going to ask these. Of course, you can see that this is nonlinear, but I'm not going to cover those. I'm just going to cover this, this, and this. Okay? So there's 3 questions. The question before, this is a question. That could be a question, you know, just graph. Then any of those 3 right there could be a question. So there's 5 questions there I could give you. Okay? And this is probably negative, and this is what I've already covered. There is the correlation coefficient. And I don't do that because you have to sum up all your differences and all your y differences. Basically, you have to take the regression, the best fit formula, and you have to take it another step because the best fit formula is in there. And you have to take it one more step. And that's why it's just not worth it. Okay? I think if you go into first variable statistics, first variable statistics on your calculator, I think it'll give you R. One of those applications, it'll give you the correlation coefficient. In fact, on some of your calculators, hold on, when you go here, there is more information. If you scroll down, you'll find R. Who's got one of those calculators? Anybody? What kind you got? Okay. Is it a plus or a... I don't know why some of them do it and some of them don't. It could be something not turned on in the stats, but can I see yours? See, on that last problem, her R is, well, where is that? Calculate. We need regression. Second. L1, comma. You didn't tell me I was going to have to do it all over again. Yeah. Her R is 0.97. And see, hers, I don't know what's turned on with hers and it's not turned on with mine. So what I suggest you do is Google TI-83 and find out how to turn that on, because I would probably say it's in stat setup, maybe. I don't know. Setup editor.
It's under, if you remove second, catalog.
Second catalog.
Zero, above zero.
I'm looking, okay?
And then it's in there, I don't remember exactly where.
Oh, so you don't know where it is, but you're gonna start me off on it. Okay, thank you. I'm just kidding.
I don't know.
Might be under linear. Look up L. No, correlation. Somebody type in a C. Where's C? Alpha? C? Oh, well. Type in C and see if you can pull up coefficient. Correlation coefficient. But you turn on something, and I'll try to research it, but it should give you everything. I'll look it up and see if I can find it, because I know only about 3 of y'all will do it. The rest of y'all just won't do it because it's so much work. Second entry. See, right down here, it'll give you an R squared and an R. And you need to put in your notes that the R is the correlation coefficient. And if somebody finds that out in the next few minutes, let me know. Because all of y'all need to have that so you can do your homework, but I'm not going to ask you for the correlation coefficient. Okay? Now, and it tells you between 1, it tells you what happens if it's above 1 or positive 1, and it tells you what it's a negative 1. The closer it is to 1, the stronger the correlation is. Just like probability. If I tell you there's a 0.97 probability, then that means it's probably going to happen. Okay? A correlation of 0.97 means there is a strong what? Correlation. I drink too much wine, I have to pee. There's a strong correlation. If you drive like a maniac, you're going to run into a tree. Okay? Question. Right. Complaint. Okay. Current slide. There we go. I don't think I need to cover that, because the closer it is to 1 or negative 1, the stronger the coefficient. I meant the stronger the correlation. No. That you might want to write down, except for the nonlinear. You see that you have, I mean, you don't have to write down every single. You might want to just make a note of these. Strong negative, moderate negative, no linear. I mean, those are pretty self-explanatory. These are test questions. I would give you one of these, like.
Can I take a picture of it?
Yeah. You take a picture if you want to, that's fine. Okay? The only one that's not a question is the last one. I don't do nonlinear in here.
Yeah.
Okay?
But it says that G is not nonlinear.
I'm sorry, what?
It says that G is nonlinear.
Yeah, because it's
Yeah.
straight across. 0. Correlation coefficient is 0. There's no way a calculator, if you put all those on a calculator, the calculator would say 0. It wouldn't. I mean, and there's no way you could determine that. If you see a pattern, then chances are there's a correlation. Okay? There's a correlation right there, positive correlation. Now do you see why I skipped 4.1 and 4.2? Because chapter 5 is so much more important than 4.1 and 4.2 as far as the mathematical. Yeah. So they give you another one. See, there is the math behind the correlation coefficient. And I'm not going to ask you to do that. Find out your calculator how to get R. Okay? Google, when you go home, say finding correlation coefficient on TI-83. And it'll probably tell you how to go in and change those settings. Oh, class activity. We need to do that, don't we?
Yeah, let's do it.
Let's do groups. See? More of that. More of the same. Now let's see what 4.2. Okay, 4.2 is where they're fitting the line. Again, your calculator does this. So I'm not going to, but they do find what? The slope and the equation. See there at the bottom? They're reviewing how to find the slope and the equation, just like I have done. There, they are putting the linear regression line in the data points. Is everybody listening?
Yes.
Okay. And I'm not going to, well, here, now, this is worth mentioning. Not testable, but it's worth mentioning. If you want to find B1, you take your correlation coefficient and you multiply it by SY over SX. Okay? In other words, that R is kind of used like what? Slope. Okay? It's kind of used like slope. And that's why they're multiplying by R. Just think of slope, because that's the slope and the correlation have a lot to do with each other. Good gosh, they're going to wear that daggone problem out. And see, here's the prediction. What would happen if you tried to go to 130 feet? Has anybody ever seen the TV show? And I know I'm an old man, so I watch a lot of shows that y'all don't. But Oak Island. Anybody ever seen The Mystery of Oak Island? Oh my gosh, it is so interesting how they go down to 150 feet and find metal objects back in the 1600s. Somebody drilled down there in the 1600s and buried this stuff. And it's just amazing. But what will happen if they go down to 130 feet? Well, what will happen as far as whatever they're asking for? And that's why we get the slope and the point and the equation, so we can predict what we'll hit at 130 feet. We can put in 130 feet. And what were they asking? I'm sorry. Hold on. How do you go back on this thing? Time to drill. How much time will it take us to drill if we wanted to go 200 feet? Well, then we would plug 200 into the equation. Now, you said you were going into business. And right now, I'm teaching 109, which is the Algebra 4 business. And we pound this over and over and over. Hold on a second. I'm sorry. This right here. Once you find the point slope equation, then you need to know what you're doing. It predicts. What will happen if my company makes 2,000 widgets? What kind of profit margin will we see? And then you plug it in, 2,000 widgets. You plug it into the formula, and you actually get over and over and over. If you're going into business, you're going to be doing this a lot. And the least square regression, you're going to be doing it a lot. So any of you going into business, accounting, marketing, anything having to do with retail, you're going to be doing this. If you're being paid anything. Okay? Again, more of the same over and over. Interpretation of the slope. Slope equals, and write this down for your standardized testing. Slope equals rate of what?
Change.
Good job. Rate of change. Whether you're in calculus or business 101, slope equals rate of change.
That sounds like a good question.
It is. Slope is the red neck. Hold your pinky up and you say rate of change. Y is equal, f of x is equal. That's all there is to it. This is just a different name to make it sound fancy. And you know how people are all about wanting to be fancy. Putting on airs. Hold your pinky up. Dang old Patrick. Dang old idiot. Not gonna do that, not gonna do that, not gonna do that. They're gonna wear that thing out. Now, make sure you can pull up the sample statistics. Everybody should be able to do that. Go back to the calculator, and that's all I'm gonna cover on that. Go back to your stat, just so you'll know how to do it. Calculate first variable statistic, and then type L1, comma, L2, and I showed you how to do that in Unit 1. So that's another question I could ask you. After you found the least squared, after you found the slope and the correlation and the formula, the equation, what's the mean of all the data? I might ask you something like that. And there it is. Mean is equal to 20.3. Okay? First variable statistic. Calculate, then first variable statistic. And then L1, comma, L2. Now, you remember 4.1 homework? Is there any questions that we haven't covered, or do you remember?
I just remember the correlation coefficient.
Yeah, don't use formula, use your calculator. Anybody found out how to do it, how to get your calculator to say it yet? Okay, I will research it, and I'll have to call TI, I'll do that. All right, now, I think we're about ready for a test, aren't we? 4.1, 4.2, and whatever we cover in 5, because I only covered 3 sections in 5. Intro to probability, the additive rule, the multiplicative rule, and counting. Did we do counting with the lottery?
Yes.
Then we've covered everything. So that means, when do y'all come in here again? That means we're going to go over homework questions sent in to me via email. So do that. That means homework is coming to a conclusion probably Tuesday or Thursday. And that means that the test is going to be we'll probably go over it Tuesday or Thursday next week. So that means y'all got to get to work, procrastinators.
Yes, sir.
Y'all have a good day. Keep between the ditches. I'm off the clock.
It's different from yours.
All right. Okay, what do you want me to do? Stat?
Click the stat plot.
Okay, stat plot. Okay.
Yeah, I think I kept the
Second.
numbers from the last one I did.
Stat plot. Hit enter. Turn it on. Ooh, this is nice. Can I have your calculator? Hit that. It's set up. Everything's set up for you. All you have to do now is hit second. Hit graph. And I know what you'd forget. Zoom and hit zoom stat 9.
Oh, okay.
Zoom stat.
All right.
Because it'll zoom the statistics instead of a.
I haven't been able to pull up the graph. Just do that.
Okay, you got something wrong with your data. Stat. With stat. Edit. You haven't got any data in there. Let's go 2, 4, 6, 8. Okay. I'm going to go up here and say 10, 20, 30, 40. And go, hold on. Second stat plot. Turn it on. See it's on. You got it on. Go 1 and 2. Now hit graph. And now hit 9. Oh, sorry. Graph. Oh, it already did it. Okay. When it's on a low scale, it'll do it. Otherwise, you hit zoom 9 in there.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, well, hold on. Okay, I can't type a comment.
Haley, you need to verify your
You're pretty
email.
bad.
Snapchat. Hubert, I'm gonna fail your class.
But it didn't
You
work.
what?
You did fail.
Yep, you will. Everybody's going to fail. All right, let's see. What are you trying to do first?
The L1.
Okay, second.
L2. Yeah, I can't.
L1, comma. It probably will read it. Hold on. It might be defaulting.
Well, I did it like that, and I didn't get the same answers.
Okay, let's do this. Let's see. Stat, calculate linear regression.
That one is the same.
Okay, which one are you doing though? I don't know which one you were doing.
Uh,
Which one are you doing?
the-
First variable statistic? Okay, I'm Hebrew.
I'm just standing here watching my pocket.
You want me to do first variable statistic? Is that
Yes,
the one?
that's what I can't get. To be the same thing.
My grandma's car is one.
Second.
My grandma wrecked his car, then I wrecked my
Mhm.
grandma's car, and so now we're all driving my
Okay,
car.
hold on. Go to,
Yeah.
well, it won't let me do anything.
I just think it's funny that my grandma wrecked his car, and then
Stop.
I wrecked my grandma's car. I just have no one wrecked mine.
Hold on.
Oh, there he is, look, let's see what he
It won't let you do that. So second, L2.
Why is it someone white driving? Who is that? Oh, that's a different car. That's not my papa.
It won't
I
let
was
you.
like, why is he white? My papa's not there. I'm just gonna believe what I was like. I'll drive myself. Isn't it not only that one that left something? I don't drive like a maniac either. I got hit.
You're so smart.
I know what, it was my fault.
You figured it out.
Like, I had to pay the, I actually got hit. The fine.
I really hope you don't
that
take the
much.
test while I'm in Indiana.
Yeah, I am. I made sure I wrote that down. And I put,
Cause that's
Give
next
test
Tuesday
when
and Thursday.
people are
I
not
won't be
here.
Either way.
you can do it online.
I know.
Oh yeah, I gotta give y'all the in-class
I'll be in
test.
Indiana.
Well, take it when you get back. Don't worry about it. It's only bonus points.
Hey, can our in-class test be like standard deviation again? Also, I'm standing right here to watch my papa pull up because I wrecked my grandma's car, and so we're all having to drive my car, so I'm waiting for him to pull up.
Okay.
And I told him to park so it's not obvious that I'm getting picked up.
Whatever.
I'm gonna see where he parks at.
Oh gosh, I forgot to record. I forgot to stop the recording.